In the heart of a remote land, nestled between ancient hills, lay the village of Obim. It was a place bound by traditions, some as old as the hills themselves. One of these customs was a solemn, lonely ritual. When a woman's husband passed away, she was escorted to the Shrine of Silence, a place of forced isolation where her grief was meant to be borne alone, hidden away from the village's daily life. For generations, this was the unwritten law. A heavy cloak of sorrow draped over every widow. One after another, they disappeared behind the shrine's quiet walls, their stories ending in silence. This was the way of Obim. Until Adi's world was once filled with rhythm. Her husband Chaik was the village drummer, a man whose hands seemed to speak a language of their own. He wasn't just a musician. He was the heartbeat of every festival, every celebration, every rite of passage. Adaze remembered the first time he placed a small, hand-carved drum in her hands. His own hands, strong and calloused from years of drumming, were gentle as they guided hers over the taut, sun-dried skin. "Feel this, Adaze," he'd murmured, his voice a low, comforting rumble like a distant drumbeat. "This isn't just wood and hide. It's the heartbeat of the village. It speaks of life, of joy, of us." Through him, she learned to listen. She learned that every rhythm told a story. The frantic, joyful beat of a wedding, the steady, somber rhythm of a naming ceremony, and the slow, mournful pulse of a farewell. The drum was their connection, not just to each other, but to the entire community. It was the sound of their love, echoing through the village square. But then, a sudden illness fell upon Chaik, swift and unforgiving. The vibrant rhythm of his life began to slow, the powerful beats growing fainter until, one quiet evening, they stopped altogether. The heartbeat of the village, and of Adizi's world, fell silent. The silence that followed was deafening. As tradition dictated, the village elders, their faces etched with grim duty, came to her home. They spoke in hushed, formal tones, their words wrapped in the sanctity of ancient law. "It is time, Adaze," the eldest among them declared. "The Shrine of Silence awaits." They expected tears, quiet acceptance, a resigned nod. It was what they had always seen. But in Adiz's eyes, they saw something else, a flicker of defiance, a spark they hadn't anticipated. She listened to their decree, but inside her, a different rhythm was beginning to form. It was a beat of rebellion, fueled by the memory of Chaik's voice telling her that the drum was the sound of life, not a prelude to silent suffering. That night, as Obim slept under a blanket of stars, Adaze did not walk the lonely path to the shrine. Instead, cloaked in the shadows of the moon, she moved in the opposite direction. She slipped quietly through the winding, empty lanes, her feet carrying her toward the heart of the village, the central square. It was the same square where Chaik had played, where their love story had unfolded to the rhythm of his drums. Clutched in her hands was the small drum he had given her, its wooden body cool against her trembling fingers. She took her place in the center of the moonlit clearing, took a deep breath, and let the memories of his hands guide her own. Then she began to play. At first, the beat was soft, hesitant, like a question whispered into the night. Tap, tap, tap. It was a rhythm of sorrow, a lament for the love she had lost. The sound, so foreign in the midnight quiet, traveled down the empty streets and seeped through the cracks of closed doors and shuttered windows. It was a sound Obim hadn't heard outside of a festival, a lone drum breaking the sacred stillness of the night. It was an act of profound defiance. Inside the quiet homes, and more importantly, within the lonely walls of the Shrine of Silence, other women heard it. These were the widows, the forgotten ones, whose grief was meant to be invisible. They recognized the rhythm. It was the sound of a shared sorrow, a pulse they all felt in their own hearts. One by one, drawn by this impossible sound, they began to stir. A door creaked open here, a shadow moved there. Cautiously, then with growing courage, they emerged from their isolation, their figures creeping out of the darkness and moving toward the source of the sound. They were no longer separate souls in silent suffering. They were a river of shadows flowing toward the light. Back in the square, a dizzy rhythm was changing. The beat grew stronger, bolder, more insistent. It was no longer just a lament. It was a call to arms, a declaration. Soon she was no longer alone. The first widow stepped into the square, then another, and another. They came from all corners of the village, their faces pale in the moonlight, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. Within minutes, dozens of women stood behind a dais, a silent army drawn together by a single drum. The air was thick with unspoken stories of loss and loneliness. Feeling the strength of the women behind her, a dais lifted her voice, and it rang out, clear and powerful, over the beat of the drum. "We are the women of Obim," she cried. "We have loved, and we have lost, but we are not shadows of suffering, to be hidden away. We are the mothers, the sisters, the daughters of this village. We are its strength." Her words ignited a fire in the hearts of the other widows. They began to chant, their voices joining hers, rising into a powerful chorus that shattered the night's tranquility. "We are the strength of Obim. We will not be silent." With a dais at the forefront, the drums still beating a powerful, defiant rhythm, the procession of women began to march. They moved as one body, their footsteps echoing the beat of the drum. Their destination was the elders' council chamber, the seat of power and tradition in Obim. The sound of their approach, the drumming, the chanting, the unified footsteps, was unlike anything the village had ever known. It was the sound of revolution. The elders, roused from their sleep by the commotion, were startled, then alarmed. They gathered at the council entrance, their faces a mixture of confusion and anger. They saw the crowd of women, their faces illuminated by moonlight, their eyes burning with a conviction that was impossible to ignore. They saw a dais, standing tall, her drum held high. They had expected a single widow's quiet submission. They were met with the collective voice of generations of silenced women. The drumming stopped. In the sudden, ringing silence, a dais stepped forward. She did not shout. She spoke with a calm, unwavering dignity that commanded more attention than any cry of anger. She spoke of Chaik, of the love and life they shared. She spoke of the crushing loneliness of the shrine, of the tradition that treated grief like a disease to be quarantined. She spoke of resilience, of the need to honor loss not with isolation, but with community. She spoke for every woman standing behind her, giving voice to their silent pain. The elders listened, their stern expressions slowly giving way to contemplation. The women's collective presence was a force they could not simply dismiss. The power of Adizi's words, backed by the silent testimony of dozens, was undeniable. A long, intense debate followed, lasting until the first rays of dawn painted the sky. The elders argued, they deliberated, but in the end, they could not escape the truth of what a dais had said. The tradition was not just old, it was cruel. It did not honor the dead. It punished the living. And so, with the rising sun came a new dawn for Obim. The law was abolished. The shrine of silence was opened, its doors never to be closed on a grieving widow again. The women were welcomed back into the heart of the village, not as figures of pity, but as respected members of the community, honored for their strength and resilience. Weeks later, the village held its first festival since the change. The square was alive with color, music, and laughter. And at the very center of it all stood a dais. In her hands, she held a brightly painted drum. She looked out at the faces of her fellow villagers, the elders, the children, and the widows, now mingling freely, their faces bright with joy. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. Then she began to play. It was a joyful, powerful rhythm, not a beat of anger or defiance, but a rhythm of freedom, of unity, of life renewed. And as her drumbeat filled the air, the entire village of Obim began to dance, their feet stomping the ground in a celebration of community, knowing that grief could be honored with love, not with chains. The heartbeat of the village was strong once more. Thank you for watching this story of courage and change. If you were moved by Adi's journey, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales from around the world. We'll see you next time.